And I am grateful to the thousands of volunteers and contributors who have chipped in, who have knocked on doors, who have made calls, and who have put their faith and trust in me. It has been the honor of my life to be your candidate. And I want to be clear, although I am no longer running for president, I will do everything in my power to defeat Donald Trump and fight for the future of our country.
Well, there you have it. Senator Kamala Harris has officially bowed out of the race for president. We, of course, told you about her decision live right here on Hill TV, following a statement that read in part, "My campaign for president simply doesn't have the financial resources we need to continue."
And the reaction was immediate. Joining us for a deep dive into Harris's announcement, what it means for the Democratic presidential primary, is political reporter for The Hill, Julia Manchester. Julia, it's great to see you.
Always great
Thanks
to have
for having
you,
me, guys.
Of course. Okay, so Kamala is out. Who loses? Who benefits? I guess Kamala loses, but who actually? So she had a measly 4% of the vote. Who's actually going to get it? What do you think?
Right. So I think that's the question everyone is asking right now. But it's really hard to say because I think this is part of the reason why Kamala dropped out. She was kind of between the centrist and progressive lane. She never made herself in a clear portion in either of the lanes.
Right.
So it's hard to say where that vote will go because we don't know really what side of this divide her supporters are on. But like I said, that's part of the reason why she dropped out. You know, we're seeing this divide. You have Buttigieg and Biden representing the centrist establishment lane of the Democratic Party. And then you have Warren and Sanders leading the more progressive side of the party. And Kamala Harris's issue is that she couldn't find really a section in either of those lanes.
She didn't know who she wanted to be. And if you don't know, the voters aren't going to know either, and they're not going to trust you to fight for their priorities.
Right.
The polling I was looking at said basically like 1 point was likely to go to Biden, 1 point was going to go to Warren, 1 point was going to go to Bernie. So basically nothing will
I
really
was
change.
thinking that it would go to Warren and maybe Buttigieg, because I mean, what you really saw
He was
that,
in there too,
right?
yeah.
So Warren's initial rise, about a month ago, was largely attributed to her massive fall in the polls. They had a huge crossover in the number of support, but I mean, ultimately, she just didn't have very much to offer, right? I mean, she was blaming her campaign on lack of funding. I mean, she had canceled a New York Wall Street fundraiser literally out. That's how everybody found out.
Exactly.
Right?
That's how we all really got wind of it. But it's not only, I think, whether she, the lack of funding or not being a progressive or centrist. I think part of it was that her campaign was just poorly managed.
Terrible.
I mean, there was a lot of infighting. There was, we saw that New York Times piece that came out around Thanksgiving that really shed a lot of light on the tension between her sister, Maya Harris, the co-campaign chairwoman, and her campaign manager, Juan Rodriguez, sorry. And I think there was just so much tension
and they were
there.
trying to run it from Baltimore and San Francisco.
California. There wasn't a central area. And it was interesting because, when she chose Baltimore as her headquarters, we kind of thought, okay, this makes sense. She's a senator. She's in Washington quite a bit. So it makes sense that she wants to stay somewhat local, but not too Washington-centric. But part of the reason, she has all of these California operatives, California campaign alums. So they're in California. They want to run things a California way, but that's a completely different way of running a traditional widespread presidential campaign.
But that was one of the things that the reporting said as well. And I knew the moment that I saw, because it was the Times and the Post had reporting about this campaign infighting. And you know what's going on behind the scenes. All of them see the reels coming off the bus and they want to throw each other under it so that they can say, well, if only they'd listened to me, then this all would have worked out okay. But I think the other issue was she did come out of the gates so strong, right? 20,000 person rally in Oakland, and then she's that first debate, man, she's ready to go. She punches Joe Biden in the nose. Honestly, she was the only person who has ever really laid a glove on him at all. Then it ends up, looking to prepackage. She equivocates on Medicare for all, and we go from there. But at the beginning, it really looked like, oh, she could challenge Biden for African-American voters. California's moved up in the primary lineup, so that's newly important. So she built out this massive staff to be that sort of national frontrunner campaign. And when that evaporated, they did not adjust and pare down nearly quick enough.
I think she really started off too strong, and she wanted to portray herself almost as too much of a frontrunner. Even before she started running, I think a lot of people in the media had labeled her as a frontrunner almost a female version of Barack Obama. And I think that's why that 20,000 person rally was very important to her campaign. The issue was, if you want to come out strong in Iowa and New Hampshire and some of these early primary states, these voters don't care about a 20,000 person campaign rally in Oakland. And I think her campaign was very late to the game and creating a very strong ground game and building that infrastructure in Iowa and New Hampshire and South Carolina. So I think that was what part of did her
These are
campaign.
the victims of media narratives. You have Beto, who was wish-casted into the campaign. You have Kamala, who was wish-casted in the campaign. Cory Booker, wish-cast. I mean, all over and over again. Kristen Gillibrand, the future Obama, the feminist icon, great prosecutor. She can go after Trump. All this. It didn't work out. I mean, ultimately, it does come down to A, you need to stand for something nationally, and B, you actually need to run a real campaign in Iowa. Remember, she said she was going to move to Iowa. What happened?
Exactly. I think it's just so hard to make a prediction these days. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I think a lot of us were saying Elizabeth Warren is probably in the best position to be the Democratic nominee. But then you see Pete Buttigieg climbing up in the polls, and you see Buttigieg and Biden, trying to, Buttigieg is trying to come out with this strategy of doing really strong in Iowa and New Hampshire. But what happens when you get to South Carolina? Biden is kind of the flip side of that. Do okay in Iowa and New Hampshire, but do really strong in South Carolina. Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, much stronger in Iowa and New Hampshire as well. So, it's just so hard for us to make a prediction these days because I think right now it's just that the field is so large that it's so hard to look at polling because it's just so split in multiple different directions.
To that point, this is actually hilarious. A bunch of people were tweeting this yesterday. The Chris Cillizza and Harry Enton's definitive 2020 Democratic candidate power rankings from January a year ago, 2019. Number 1, Kamala Harris.
Wow.
Number 2, Beto.
Yes.
Number 3 was Biden. 4, Warren. 5, Cory Booker. 6, Sherrod Brown. And then Bernie Sanders, just above Kirsten Gillibrand. So to your point, they had Kamala 1 and Beto 2 a year ago, thinking that they were going to be frontrunners. It just tells you everything.
Exactly, and this was way before you have figures like Andrew Yang jumping into the race, or even Pete Buttigieg jumped in February. So I think that list was probably just who, an assumption as to who was running, but obviously Sherrod Brown didn't even run.
It was based on
actually vote.
It was based on literally nothing, their thoughts and feelings.
It is, it's literally just out of the ether they pull these things out. Okay, Julia.
Thank you, Julia.
Thanks, guys.
Great to have you.
Next on Rising, Iran's President Hassan Rouhani. He's called for the release of some of the nation's citizens who were arrested during recent fuel protests.
Iranian expert Trita Parsi is going to tell us more about the background behind that unrest and also the latest on the fallout of the Iraqi Prime Minister's resignation. That when Rising continues.